Hello everyone and welcome to episode 301 that has been waiting for around 8 to 9 months to be made. Yeah, I've been away for a while and I also uploaded a video and gave you guys an update on, how everything's been going on and why have I been absent from YouTube and other places. So we're back, as you can see, and I have the special guest today, as I mentioned in my 1.5k subscriber special video as well, Serena Ilie, and we're gonna talk a lot about the game art, education, in trying to get education in game industry and all that stuff, and just getting ready for a lot of cool shit. So there's a lot to talk, right? Do you agree?
I agree. I concur.
Yes, indeed. And let's just begin, right? First of all, how was your day?
It was actually pretty fine. A bit less interaction with students today since I work from home. Since at work right now it's pretty flexible, so I get some days that I work from home and some days that I'm actually on site and helping students. And pretty much I did a bunch of research, some slides for you guys for the next boot camps, and also I got some questions on Discord, but I usually just respond to those pretty fast, so yeah.
All right, awesome. And oh boy, let's start with the original question what I start off every episode with, which is basically give us a little introduction on how you got into this pathway and just world of visual arts and design and art and all that stuff. Just what was your story basically from the start?
Sure. It's actually pretty slightly weird and funny. I mean, of course, most artists say oh yeah, since I was very little, I wanted to draw and I drew a lot. Which, to be honest, it's also part of what I also did. I started very little to just start painting and draw and doodle a lot of things. But my, let's say, main story, quote unquote, starts in high school, where I actually got a passion for Japanese language. And I just got obsessed with knowing the language, writing the language, and everything. And I guess that passion kind of faded away as soon as I noticed that I had a plateau. And then I got to the point where I was also teaching it as well, and that's how I kind of got some teaching skills and just improving my patience and knowing how to talk or to test someone in certain areas. And then pretty much I was starting to think, what do I actually want to do? Because I don't feel like just translating Japanese for the rest of my life. And pretty much I was like, okay, what am I good at? Well, I'm good at drawing-ish. Not fully there, but I could get much better than this. And probably, of course, then also it was the wave of being concept artist and 3D artist and all the technical stuff going on with the games industry. And I was also getting more and more into gaming as I was getting more passionate about it. And then I talked to my parents about it, and they're like, sure, whatever makes you happy, which, to be honest, was kind of a privilege I realized later, but that was the situation. And pretty much I also got mentoring or tutoring, I should say, on drawing. And my mentor actually told me or suggested me to go abroad because I'm from Romania. So for me as a high school student, I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go to the local university and do my job and see what happens. But my mentor was like, no. It's okay. You can go abroad. You can do better. I was like, okay, I don't know what the situation with the money is. But my parents were, again, very supporting. So they sent me out into the Netherlands. And that's how I got to do CMGT, so Creative Media and Game Technologies at Saxion University, and got to learn a lot. I also got a job after finishing my studies for like 5 or 6 months, and then I got laid off. And then pretty much after 6-ish, 8-ish months, I also got approached by the team leader of the CMGT teachers team lead. And he asked me, "Hey, do you actually want to teach? Because we need people to teach." And I was like, "Oh, sure, let me give this a try." So that was kind of my path, let's say. Now, in terms of what I do now and what I like to do, it kind of changed throughout university, because I started initially with the thought, oh, I'm going to be a concept artist. And well, we know how that ended up now with all the AI wave and so on. And even though I did not really think about it at the time, as soon as I started learning 3D art, I pretty much instantly loved it, and I got more into it. And when I got more into not engine development, but more like technical bits that do pretty stuff, let's say, quote unquote. I just got more into, the technical art that comes with game art. So that's where I am now.
All right, so that was an interesting path, but there's also a lot to unpack here. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this podcast right now could potentially be a lot of students right now who are kind of curious about, like, how was it during the times you were a student? How was CMGT? Like, how was the curriculum? Like, just how different it is now that
Oh boy.
compared to, I mean, you're also a teacher, so you have pretty good self-awareness of what the current state is, but if you could give us a brief rundown of how things were, like, just any funny stories or something like that.
Sure. Just to give everyone kind of like a context, the curriculum at CMGT just changed from like a lectures and lab structure to a bootcamp structure. That's also probably the reason why they needed more people, right? And back in the days, well, it's actually funny because I don't necessarily have an accurate preview, let's say, on the regular student years, because most of my student time was actually during the pandemic. So everything was just shifted online. Like I had maybe 6 months, if that, in the first year, and then from that everything was online until I was all the way in my 4th year. So I didn't really have, let's say, the social time during my student years, even though everything was online, and I could, let's say, talk to some of the students on Discord or what we used to have as platform, Blackboard. Now you guys have Brightspace. That also changed. But to be honest, personally, I quite liked it. And I know some of the teachers also kind of liked it in terms of like how accessible it was to just, have your pajamas, record the lecture, and then send it to the students, and the students would watch it, and then they learn somehow. The not so fun part, which I also heard from the teachers, but also from some of the students, was that it felt very artificial. So basically, when we would have the labs, which were made, or their purpose was mostly for doing exercises or actually practicing or applying the knowledge that we should have learned, let's say, in the lectures, were very awkward because it was just the teacher there in terms of like, oh, if anyone's there, they're there to help for questions or for just general things or problems. And then you would have only the teacher showing their camera and then the other students not showing their camera or something. To be honest, I always tried to have my camera open because I knew how hard it would be. Like I empathize a lot with people, like general. So I just tried to put myself into the shoes of a teacher, even back then, and be like, yeah, probably they would like to at least see my face a bit. But in terms of courses, it was quite complicated compared to what you have now, because we had different courses per quartile. So pretty much we would have 4 things at the same time for, what was it? It's a quartile, so that's probably 4-5 weeks or something. If I remember correctly, I might be very wrong, but I know now we have like around, or you have around, what was it? 10 weeks. Math, not my strong suit. You have 10 weeks of boot camps, and then no, a bit more. Anyway, point is less less time, which would make it very, very chaotic. But it worked out, and I think, to be honest, right now is a bit better in terms of how we deliver information. But yeah, that was how it was mostly in my student years. And I don't know if you have any other specific questions in terms of like courses or anything else.
Well, yeah, but before that, I have to make something clear, like for everyone. For context, for anyone who's not initiated, for the regular podcast listeners, she's my teacher, and I study at the same university she teaches. I study at Saxion at Enschede, like CMGT. It's basically game development. Like, let's just say that. So yeah, about questions related to, well, the teaching experience. Like, the first thing that came to my mind when I wanted to ask you when I was preparing for this interview was, and oh my god, just on a side note, why the lighting changes a lot without me doing anything? Like the first couple of minutes, the lighting was just bluish. Now it's just flat color. I don't know. It's just, I'm tripping. Anyway.
I think it's the sun, but
yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah. Basically.
You're good.
Thank you. The thing is, how has the experience of teaching affected you personality-wise, like both in terms of art and also just as an individual itself, you know? Because teaching is like one of those particular experiences that some people can handle it and grow from it, and some people just do it for a job. And they do it not because they don't want to, it's because they just don't have the teaching thing in them, and that's fine. It's just different personality types, you know? So
yeah, no, I get that.
How is it for your case?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Because, to be honest, I think it definitely changed me even when I was teaching Japanese, like back in high school. But pretty much, I think it just made me overall more and more patient than I used to be. And even more self-aware in a sense, because a lot of the times when I'm actually meeting with students to, well, either solve a problem or ask not to ask a question, to respond to a question, or provide feedback or help or whatever, I can sometimes see myself in them. And sometimes it's weird because like, oh, that's how I was. And I feel like I'm talking to myself right now, even though it's not the case. And I think, yeah, overall it's the patience. Yeah, that because I used to be very impatient with progress, and just kind of, and I still do sometimes, and I get frustrated, and then I try not to give up, obviously, but sometimes it's extremely hard, especially when it comes to just taking time to actually learn something new, especially with technical things. I recently learned Houdini, which is a monster of a software. It can just do a lot of things, right? And I was just trying to learn one small part of procedural modeling. But even that, it was just insane, and it took me so long, mostly because I did not have the best approach to it. And I also had a mentor, and he did an incredible job, to be honest, but I still feel like I just gave myself way too much to chew at the same time. Like, instead of going through a few tutorials, like quite some tutorials, I went through one tutorial, and then I was like, okay, I'm ready to make my own project and just do my own thing right away, instead of just practicing through tutorials and then going into more in-depth stuff and then asking my mentor like, hey, is this okay? But overall, in terms of like how teaching changed me, yeah, it's the patience, it's the self-awareness, and I think also a lot of empathy, in a sense. Like, I am a hypersensitive person, but sometimes I don't really pay attention to it, or to my quote unquote symptoms, let's say. And right now I also have study coaching, which is basically just sitting down with one of the students and then trying to see, oh, do you have redos? Are you okay mentally or physically? Are you doing okay in the study? Can I do anything to help you, like to maybe plan something better, or to just provide, an ear to listen, or can I give you advice to do better, pretty much. But that again made me more self-aware and gave me more time to realize how much empathy goes into just teaching, I guess. And yeah, I think that's pretty much how it kind of changed me.
All right. Yes, I can tell from first-hand experience that you are very patient, because for the art fundamental, I was like, was miserable, and you helped me a lot, actually. So I really,
I'm glad.
I appreciate that. Yes. And another interesting thing that came to my mind, I think a couple of months ago when we were talking, you mentioned at some point your goal was to become a 3D environment artist, and it changed into a tech artist, if I'm not. Tell us about that. How did that transition happen? And are you still like teaching aside? You still, I'm sure you want to grow as an artist in the industry in your own way or something. How is that going? And basically just the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Well, again, that comes back to how I kind of transitioned from the idea of being a concept artist to a technical artist in my 4th year of uni. Because again, at first I was like, oh yeah, let me start learning drawing and perspective and draw really good. But as soon as I saw how much I need to actually put, or how much effort I need to put into drawing, that also put me a bit away, because drawing just felt like a comfy zone. But when I realized, like, oh, this is actually, this will have to become something that I sell. This will become something that will need to quantify in hours that I will need to spend and be paid for those hours. Therefore, what the fuck do I need to do? But as soon as that thought also came through, I learned more about 3D. And then I was like, oh, okay. I also talked then with other higher students, higher year students, back when I was in my second year, I think. And I kind of got a better perspective at how the game art, let's say, pipeline works in terms of jobs and how you can transition from one position to another. So it was more like, okay, so you can be either, let's say, a generalist, like a 3D generalist, and then go maybe get to be a prop artist, and then after that, just environment artist. And that's kind of what I was looking forward to. And that's how I started, doing more props and small environments like dioramas and so on, somewhere in my second and third year. But then in my fourth year, when I had my graduation, I actually got a graduation project that involved so many softwares, but in a technical perspective, because I basically had to look at how efficient a software is in terms of cloth simulations. And that somehow attracted me more than making props. Even though I still love making props and putting, like, set dressing an environment, just the technical bits of or research bits as well, and looking at documentation just attract me way more now. So that's kind of how I transitioned. And now, based on the how I want to grow as an artist, I'm still doing stuff in my off time. I'm also trying to catch up with, like, the new developments of Unreal or Unity, what's new, what's coming, and so on. So and I'm also trying to, keep up with people that are already in the industry. Like, I have quite some friends that I can just ask how it's going and what their perspective is, and then discuss things. So I'm trying, of course, to be up to date as possible. But yeah, that's kind of what I do. And of course, I also have passion projects, right? Like, for example, the procedural temple. That's also my portfolio. That was also a passion project, but that was also one of the projects that almost broke me in terms of brain, because, again, it was something that I planned out and then realized way too late that it was way too much for me to chew. But in the end, it's fine. It's there. It's done. But yeah.
Also, for anyone who's listening, and also for the people watching on YouTube, you've probably seen it already. Down below, I have a reel of some of her works and portfolio pieces. So the procedural temple is definitely there. So yeah, that's the procedural temple we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting. But let's do a quick segue. I have a surprise I wanted to announce as well. I'm not sure everyone will like it or not, but here it goes. In the next couple of weeks, I have another group podcast project set up, and it's going to be with the recurring previous guests that I had on the show, and it's all the group podcasts usually have a theme, and the theme of this one is, drum rolls, Warhammer 40k, and of course, Serena's invited. Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah. Okay.
By the way, Serena, tell them, did I tell you about this or not? Like, this is also news to you.
No, this is news. Yes. That's awesome.
Pearson, Sweeney, Patrick, like a bunch of other artists that I had on the show that they're super big nerds of, like, Warhammer 40k. I definitely want to have them as well. Like, we need like 5-6 other people. I can definitely find people who are into Warhammer 40k from my previous guests. It's not that hard.
Fair.
Yeah, and yeah, so basically that episode is going to be a primer for anyone who wants to get into Warhammer 40k or just watch a bunch of artists geek out about their favorite factions and factions with
Let's go.
Space Marines. On that note, what is your favorite faction of Space Marine or just general factions in like Warhammer?
Well, it depends if we're talking Space Marines. I think Salamanders.
Awesome.
Because they are just nice.
They're Giga
Right?
Chats, yes.
Yeah. Them or the opposite, Black Templars. Because they, just no words, just bonk and destroy, and that's it. No care in the world.
What about orcs?
Orcs are fine. Like, I can see the appeal, right? Like, I also have friends that like orcs, and I can definitely see the appeal. However, it's not my favorite. I like them.
Same. They're not my favorites, but they're fun as hell.
Yeah, the concept, right, of like, oh, just thinking of something really hard or believing in it, and then the thing happens because you thought really hard. It was like, yeah, sure, of course, that definitely works.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're nerfed with their low intelligence, and it makes such a fun
combination,
you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, they can take over everything, but they're orcs.
Yeah. And their stuff looks fucking amazing, like in terms of kid bashing, like mini wise, but also like art wise, is just like putting stuff together that seems okay and like just glued together with not like a glue gun, but just a nail gun or something. And that looks fine because it works if I think more about it or if I believe in it.
Yeah, that's basically Green Lantern's ability, like in DC, but
yeah.
Yeah, I also was thinking about something of asking you, actually, take your opinion on. First of all, like this segment, I want to talk about design a bit, right? First of all, I want to know, like, let's pick up, for example, the modular temple one we just talked about, right? How does your design process usually go anytime you want to start working on a new project? Like, what steps do you usually take personally? And of course, professionally and personally, it's different. But in general, what is your approach to designing things and in your projects? And yeah, just any general thoughts on design itself.
Right. Well, it depends. If it's something that I take from scratch, from so like the temple that I made, that was from scratch. I just thought about the concept myself, and then try to break it down, since it is a procedural piece out of 4 tools, because I made 4 Houdini assets, and then built the environment with it. And I pretty much try to get inspiration from all the media that I consume, I guess, and then find something that sparks joy. And pretty much I got inspired, for example, for the temple, it was mostly D&D a bit, because I got a lot into Saloon's, just Saloon as a god, as a whole. I just got into it and started reading about how the clerics are actually worshipping her, and the relationship between the moon and water, and how they're doing things. And I try to imagine how that would look like. However, the first thing that I did before starting designing, let's say, the temple, I also tried to do some research in terms of, okay, what would look unique in my portfolio, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people overlook when it comes to portfolio pieces. Like just literally going on ArtStation or Google as a whole, a bit less, but mainly ArtStation, and writing, let's say, Houdini assets. A lot of people are doing, let's say, building generators or just simple generators. And I wanted to do something more special, right? To just stand out of all the building generators. So I was like, I combined my research with what I want to do, or my, not obsession, but more like little passion that I got into. So that's kind of how I start my projects. And in terms of, well, it's different from designing, let's say, a procedural model or asset rather than designing a prop or an environment, right? Because the difference between a technical artist and a prop artist is mainly the thought process behind one model that can be reused. So how do you think, as a prop artist, you think more like, okay, I can do some variations here and there with texturing, while a technical artist is going to be like, okay, what are the limits that I can set to make this prop more random depending on those limits? Doing technical procedural tools also gives the artists a bit more, well, freedom, let's say, but freedom inside the limits that the technical artist puts, if that makes sense.
Yep, it does. And also for anyone who's listening and are in the artist role in CMGT, we're gonna have procedural arts next year, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Just a little side note. Yay. Any notes, any thoughts about that one?
Just brace yourself. Not to put in fear for anyone. The thing is, if you do good in environmental art in year one right now, you're probably gonna have a pretty easy time with procedural art, from my perspective. Back in the day, we didn't have environmental art, and we had a very hard time. Because we were doing I think in year one, we had only 3D modeling and then Unity 3D. So just general stuff in Unity, which you guys now have by default anyway. And then procedural art came in as like kind of random, but also very useful. Because again, it was mainly, especially for artists, about procedural generation of textures. And you would have to get help, let's say, from an engineer or a technical designer for the scripts to generate a city with a specific theme. I'm not sure how much the actual course is going to change. Probably not too much. But again, if you paid attention in environmental art, you're going to have a pretty okay time in procedural art.
Actually, I've noticed it as well in the last two classes I've been to, the procedural art ones. A lot of terms like draw calls, like trim sheets, like even something simple as PBR was kind of alien to students.
Yeah, because of how the structure was. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Actually.
Well, not just environment art, but also art fundamentals, right? You had art fundamentals. Back in the day, we didn't have that. We just had, 3D modeling.
Model this, pass, go ahead.
In a sense, yes. It was kind of like a mini mini art fundamentals, but even less time than you had. Yeah.
And if I'm not wrong, this procedural arts is also for boot camps only, right?
I can't remember correctly because I do think it's a full one. Because the conversion stuff in my head is a bit scrambled. But if I remember correctly, I might be very wrong. Don't quote me on this. It might be that it's a full course. So how art fundamentals or environmental art is, that will also be procedural art.
All right, pretty interesting. And another thing I want to ask about design. I think, I don't know if it's just me or you've also experienced this, but recently, for me personally, like I don't seem to enjoy many new IPs that much when it comes to movies, animes, or I don't know, series, video games that much. And I think the reason for that is because I've seen so many different type of like consume too many type of genre that it doesn't have that fresh. It's hard to grab someone's attention with that freshness if they've been consuming media for like a long time or decades. So basically what I want to ask you now based off this is, has there been recently like an IP, like it could be anything, video game, like any franchise, anything, that's really caught your attention and you've been enjoying it a lot? And if so, could you also try to right now on the podcast try to deduct and deduce why is that? Maybe it's art, maybe it's a design of the story, everything, you know?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, I'm not consuming as much movie. Because right now I'm mostly into lore stuff, hence 40K. Like, to be honest, I'm pretty new to 40K, but it just grabbed me by the hand and just kept me in a room full of, yes, this is 40K, grim dark 40K, let's fucking go. So I do think that in the, let's say, modern IPs or the general movie stuff, like I even a few weeks ago, I was just talking to my boyfriend. I was like, oh, let's go. Maybe we can go to the cinema and watch a movie or something, because it's fun to at least go outside once in a month and just go watch a movie. And then I looked at the actual movie list and it was like, it was like, there's like a similar movie to Oppenheimer, and then you have the CG Lion King, and then the rest was just Oh, and of course, let's say the musical Wicked, but that's just kind of repeat. It feels a lot like just repeating, let's say, at least for the Wicked. Very. Don't get me wrong, I didn't watch it, but from the vibes and from the media that I've seen about it, it just really feels like Cinderella 2.0 with a bit of Harry Potter kind of thing. So it feels very mismatched, let's say. But I do want to make a point that pretty much I see a trend of caution when it comes to media these days, which it makes sense, right? Because most of the movies that are done are made by big corpos that are mainly looking for more profit. And what brings more profit? Things that most probably are already established and are safe to make more money. So why go out of the box of the basic stuff that people enjoy? Because we have the risk of losing money, right? So I sensed, and I still sense, quite a lot of caution, and there is so much that can be explored, right? And that goes also against AI, because to be honest, just to also get my stance out on AI, I'm totally against it in terms of like generative stuff. It's disgusting. And it's just taking people's work and mashing it together, and then that's it. And then, of course, again, for, let's say, the masses or people that don't have an eye for, let's say, good composition or cinematography or imagery or anything like that, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that this image and this movie / trailer thing looks fine. It looks like a legit thing. And then you stop a bit, let's say if you have a video, you pause, and then you see all those things that are just blended together in a soup of pixels. And then it's just not it. Right? So again, as a trend, I see a lot of caution, and it feels like, again, everyone, in terms of course, big corpos, don't get me wrong, I do like to support smaller creators, especially like when it comes to YouTube or fan-made stuff. Especially, for example, I don't know if you've seen Secret Level. It's a series.
That's on my backlog of list of things I should watch, actually.
Okay.
Yes, I know what it is.
Yes, please watch it. It's amazing. Especially the 40K episode is just fucking cool, because it's also slightly related to, Space Marine 2, like the game that came out last year.
September, I think, late September,
Yeah.
or October.
Yeah, last year. Anyway, yeah, so it's related to that, and it's just fucking cool. Because like they really paid attention to all the details in terms of like, okay, how do we get a scene to feel and look grim, dark, and just be there in the whole the whole vibe just matches the 40K. So yeah.
I'm really glad we kind of segued into the topic of AI, because a lot of things could be like, there's a lot of things we can discuss right now from this point, which actually a lot of them leads to the questions I had in mind. So
Sure.
But before that, I actually recorded, I think my first group podcast episode was about AI. Like we talked, like me and 5 other artists who I had previously on the podcast, we talked for like 2 hours or something about AI and just what would happen if, you know what, let me actually ask you the question. If there were no financial constraints for you, like, would you still do art? Like, let's say tomorrow we wake up, headline, there's no art jobs anymore. There's no game industry. Everything is just AI slop. And of course, we have to find other jobs to somehow sustain ourselves. But aside from that, would you still do art, or would you still try to learn and push yourself to that? Or would you still get that satisfaction from it, that there's no monetary value? I know it's a question you have to think about it, because yes, sure, we can say, yes, of course I would do art. I love art. I love art. But when things get hard and the life, things gets different, So I want to know what's your philosophy on that, actually.
Yeah, okay. So, to be honest, the instant response that I had was yes, like definitely, because not only I have a passion for it, but I also have the curiosity to actually, let's say, sustain the actual passion. Because I do feel that, especially in my student years, let's say, I was not necessarily curious enough, but more like I was a bit afraid to be curious, to get into, let's say, the more technical bits that now I'm doing. which is funny looking back, let's say, because it was like, man, if I really went into technical bits back in my second year, I would have been so far away from now. But hey, there's a time for everything, right? But in terms of monetary stuff, yeah, I would still do art, let's say, on the side, right? Like I would, let's say, get a whatever other job. Like that was also, let's say, in the period where I got laid off and then getting a job later. I was, again, very lucky and privileged to be able to just not need to get a job instantly. And I was just living with my boyfriend, and he was very nice to just let me work on my stuff, work on my portfolio, get a mentor, and just pretty much work only on that. And obviously also sometimes my parents and family, whatever. But yeah. And I would still do it mostly because of how it makes me feel, in a sense. Like it's more about that focus, or and I don't know if how to describe it properly, because for me it's just more a line or a progress of focus, or a progressive focus, if that makes sense. Because it starts with, let's say, a problem, right? So, for example, how do you make decals in Unity? And finding the, let's say, the more efficient way to actually make them, and running with it. So it's more, yeah, it's more about getting into the headspace for solving problems rather than just making art. For me, it's not just, oh, I want to make a pretty picture. Oh, it's more about, oh, I want to solve something and make it pretty for the other people to see. But yeah.
Actually, speaking of that, I think the most useful thing I've ever heard in my life regarding making portfolios is that, I don't know, I think it was one of the guests of the previous guests of the podcast, but what they said was basically along the lines of, you are a visual problem solver, and your portfolio should reflect that. So when you think of it from this lens, you're like, okay, so let's say I want to apply to Riot. So I know what their style is. I need to research their style, research what they do, research what they need, and just make my portfolio and show in a way as proof that, hey, I can solve your visual problems. You're not some Picasso artist, creative genius. No, you're a visual problem solver. And that doesn't mean you can't be creative, but I'm talking about the shift in mindsets right now, changing
yeah, for sure.
And
that's a change in perspective, for sure.
Yeah. And
because especially, let's say, when I talk to my parents, right, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm making art stuff, Mom. And my mom was like, oh, cool, it looks cool. And I'm like, yeah, it took me 3 months to actually figure out how to do a thing that moves like this through the vertex of the mesh and the colors on the vertex that does things. And my mom is like, what is a vertex again? So yeah.
And actually, whenever my mom asks what should I tell other people, like, what are you studying, I'm like, just game development, making games, like, which is not wrong, like, but it's still your point.
It's just simplified.
It is. And all right, so speaking of like game industry, have you ever, like, there's something I don't think I've ever asked you, to be honest. Have you ever had this idea or this itch to make games yourself? Have you ever had that ambition when you were younger, or even now? I don't know. Just, do you have any game idea you want to? Of course, if you don't want to discuss it, that's also fine. But just
no, it's okay. I think definitely in my studies, like during my studies and when I was actually getting to know more about game design and let's say the bigger picture of how games are actually made or designed for players and audiences or different audiences and so on. Before my studies, not really, because I had literally no idea. Like I was playing games, but I never really wondered, oh, how was this actually made? That question came in a bit later, like let's say just before I was starting my studies. Like, okay, what actually comes into this? But pretty much, I think. Oh my god, I blanked out. But yeah, questions about games and how to design them. Yeah. I did hear artists, right? When they're saying, "Oh yeah, I actually wondered how to make the game since I was 5 years old because I was playing Mario and whatever." I didn't really have that. Like I remember very vaguely that when I was, let's say, 3 or 4 years old. Actually, I have a very funny thing from when I was really small, because my mom keeps telling me that. I basically heard, probably from my brother, because he's 8 years older than me, that he has a personal IP address for his computer. So mini me went to my mom and said, "Hey mom, I want my own IP address." Even though I had no idea what the fuck that means. But I was also playing, I think, when I was going to my neighbors, Mario, like the early PlayStation 1 or 2 Marios. But it was so far away in my brain that when I grew and went through middle school and high school, that idea was just completely kind of in the back of my brain. And I think it's actually slightly funny because I got more into games through when I started playing Assassin's Creed Origins. But after that, I actually started binging gaming, let's say. But yeah, again, the question rose very late for some reason for me. Even though, let's say, now I would have wanted it to be way earlier. But yeah.
I mean, you're still in the process, so who knows, maybe in a year you have like that itch of, I want to make that idea into game, like,
Yeah.
or something like that.
I would love to make something like a kind of a cozy-ish game. And this is going to sound very funny, but I would make a mash of, like, let's say, 40K inspired cozy game. Like, hey, your Australians are gonna farm today. Are you gonna take care of them? Or you're an Australian and then you're a salamander, right? So you care about people, so you go save people.
Yeah. Speaking of Atreides, it's somehow reminded of Paul Atreides from Dune. That's
Oh yeah, the name. Yeah.
That's also another like franchise I never really connected with. I mean, it looks cool as hell. Don't get me wrong.
No?
Like,
Oh
yeah, exactly.
God!
I'm sorry.
It's how dare you?
I'm sorry.
It's awesome. Because I think, especially with Dune, I read the first book when I was in my first year of high school or something. And even though I didn't understand like completely the whole political conflict and just the the size of it and so on. But I really liked how oh man, now I'm getting a blank of who wrote Dune. Was it Frank Herbert?
Yes, I think Frank Herbert Dune, yeah.
Yeah, okay, there we go. How he basically portrayed the mother of Paul. Like, holy fuck, the amount of like character development, not only in Paul, but also in the mother, and how she goes through the whole change, and also being pregnant, and the whole spice thing is just amazing. Because it's slightly, and I don't remember who or what media was first, but it's very Star Wars-y, right? In a sense,
Yes.
like it has vibes for sure. And I don't remember which one came first, but I think it was Dune, and then Star Wars took like some inspiration from it and so on. But I might be very wrong.
I don't know either because I don't remember the details about those stuff. All I know is I remember I think in 2021 I went to cinema and watched the first Dune movie. That was basically my introduction to Dune. I mean, honestly, yeah, that was the introduction. It looked cool as hell, but at the same time, like sometimes you can't just connect with something. It's I don't know, like.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, because from like a story perspective, the movie does not really cut it. Like, again, I read the first book, so for me it was like, oh my god, this makes sense. Now it's clicking even better. But probably from like a person that did not read and had no idea of what the fuck, then yeah, everything would be like, huh? Why? What? What is this?
Yeah, it's one of those things like you can't really encapsulate like everything in a movie. Like you can show highlights like to the people who already know it, but yeah.
For sure.
But yeah, actually, now that I think of it, it's kind of unfair. I should also get myself involved in the literature of it and then give it a try. Yeah.
At least slightly.
I'll try because I'm interested.
Especially now that I'm also teaching, well, besides art stuff, I'm also teaching a bit of design. And one of those things this semester is interactive storytelling. And the main thing that students have to do is also writing dialogue for a scene, right? And of course, first they also have to write their own story, and then kind of take one very nice and impactful scene and then write dialogue for it. However, you really have to think how to not translate per se, but transmit information from a dialogue perspective. That is an interesting puzzle in itself, because you not only want to show like visuals in terms of like, you know, nice compositions for shots in a movie, but you also have to find a smart way to convey information. And it shouldn't sound very robotic, right? Because let's say, you're let's say cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk 2077. Like, oh, you're in a corpo not overridden. Help me here.
The backgrounds, you mean?
Like the setting. Yeah, the setting. Yeah. Like
the backstories you can choose for your character: the nomad, corpo, and street kid. I think something like that.
Yeah, but if you're corpo, right? So like if the town is like just or a town or your birth town, whatever, is just taken over by corporations and so on. And you have to go talk to one of your friends that actually by chance also has feelings for you, because you also just have to go because the corporations are saying, oh yeah, you have to go this and do that and blah blah blah. And your friend actually is kind of against what you're doing or something. And let's say the information that you want to convey in that scene is that, well, this sort of conflict of like your character wanting to just go with the flow, and then the other character that just doesn't want to go with whatever is happening, right? And of course you have to put a lot of like feelings sprinkled on it and so on, but you're not gonna, let's say, go and say as a dialogue, so I was thinking of just leaving because the corporations are here, right? Like that sounds just very bland, and it's just the information that you want to convey. Like you probably just want to say, hey, and then the other person or the main character just ignores the hey and then just starts rambling about, oh yeah, so did you know about this corporation thing that is going on? So it's really cool and blah 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 blah. So completely just getting into how the conflict would actually even start. So yeah, because like in real life, nobody is gonna be like, oh yeah, so we are in the year of 2077 and I am going to go with the corporations. Nobody talks like that. But yeah, I think I segued into storytelling, but what were we talking about again?
Yeah, we're talking about just... Damn. I also forgot. I think we were talking about design or something. Yeah, who cares? Like,
Yes.
fun stuff. But now that I think of it, especially for like the subject of narrative, like a great fun cheat code for our students is to just play games that have been known for, like, that sounds like a pretty no-brainer advice. Like that have like good narrative. Like I think some really good examples I can give. Like even if you don't play, go watch playthroughs of it. Like I mean, the king of the narrative games I think is right now Baldur's Gate 3. Like in terms of details and everything. The other game, if you're in mood for something sci-fi, fun, and comedy, I highly recommend Guardians of the Galaxy game from 2021. I think it even won an award for narrative. The narrative is perfect. Like seriously, it is really good.
Yeah.
And there's that, and also Hades games are really good because every single small action affects at some point. But maybe you want to say something about that?
Yeah, no, Hades is kind of an example of very addictive gameplay and pretty good storytelling. Like they nailed the what the audience wants, right? Because it's not just about, oh yeah, pretty characters that are very sexy and slightly on the edge of like not necessarily nudity, but just pretty much attractive, right? And of course the art style is nice. It's actually quite a challenge to analyze and replicate the actual style of Hades, which, to be honest, I would recommend it to anyone. It's really cool in terms of like just getting yourself to analyze that and trying to replicate it. And then storytelling, because of course everything that you do, or most things that you do, are recorded. So then the other characters or the NPCs overall are reacting to what you do or are not doing based on where you are in the story. So I do feel like that's kind of, let's say, slight branching, let's say, of story, but it's not necessarily a fully non-linear story, because the story is pretty much linear, if I remember correctly. It's just these small bits that are extremely interesting, right? Because since everything is recorded and then everyone reacts to it.
Yeah, pretty much. And same thing with Disco Elysium, another great game for narrative. And basically, from what I understand, like I enjoyed personally, if I want to pick something out of all of these games and see what that is that I like about all of these games that makes me enjoy these games, is that my choices, big or small, matter to the future of the gameplay, and it affects in one way or another. And I really appreciate that, and I really like that in games. And same thing.
I would check out also, like, for in terms of narrative games, not only big games, because I do feel like Hades now is pretty big, but like indie games. So like, was it A Short Hike? That's pretty much like a very slightly cozy, and very short narrative with a bit of nice gameplay, very cute art style as well. What there was another one that I had in mind, also indie, I think. I think it was Dredge. There's basically I don't remember if it was exactly indie, but I'll have to look it up. But it's pretty much again very cool art style, nice storytelling, and just it's not too long, if I remember correctly. It is just really enjoyable. It's a bit more horror-y, but still nice storytelling.
All right. Yeah, I think that sounds like something that I think I've heard about Dredge. I think it could be indie. I'm not sure as well. It's one of those cheap games on Steam that you can get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
I can look it up real quick.
Thank you so much. I have two monitors and one of them is occupied for the recording. The other one is the second monitor. So to anyone who's watching on YouTube and keeps seeing me like look that way, yeah, I'm looking at the second monitor. I kind of have to. So yeah, I hope that explains the awkward.
Like, no, Dredge. Yeah. It's made by Team 17. It's not necessarily indie. It seemed in my head somehow indie, but it's not. It's just Team 17. Okay.
All right, awesome. And okay, there's a couple more interesting questions. That one that I want to just shoot off the bat is, if you could right now work in any studio, game studio, which one is that?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question. I don't necessarily have a specific studio in mind in terms of where I would want to work. The thing is, I wouldn't necessarily want to work in a big studio, like a huge studio. Like I would definitely I would love to work for indie and what's it called? Like maybe AA studios or something. Like I like the idea, let's say, of working in a very big studio, because in a sense I see the appeal of, like, you know, getting your name on a big game that comes out, and then you get your name out there, and then it's gonna technically quote unquote be easier for you to get hired. But to be honest, in the year of our Lord 2025, even that is slightly unsure with the games industry right now. But yeah, I would just love to work for indie companies, because then you have like a very small team that you also bond with, not only like work wise, but also just let's say, social, right? Like maybe you find similar interests and that kind of stuff, and then just generally bond. Because I do think that, for example, at Saxion, we have quite some people that are, well, kind of in a sense just like me, that also nerd quote unquote about 40k or lore or game design or games in general, and that just it's just something that's pretty much nice right, to have, because you just generally feel like being social even at work. But yeah.
All right, and the next question now I want to ask is, it leads to another subject, like they're 2-in-1 bonus.
Sure.
Who are your favorite artists and just people who you look up to professionally? Like, do you have anyone in mind?
I have some some that actually I have met, like, in person. So I really love the knowledge of Kai Folbeda, if I'm saying his name correctly. He was actually also I'm not going to say mentoring me. He was not necessarily a mentor, but more like he's an acquaintance slash friend that I always look up to, and also ask about, well, stuff in Houdini, because he is a technical artist that works in the industry right now. He works at That's No Moon. Not sure exactly on what, but he does a bunch of C++ stuff and more Unreal stuff now. He used to do a lot of Houdini stuff, but yeah. So him. Then also more onto artsy stuff, but still technical. I have Nina Quos. I hope I'm saying her name right. She has a lot of pieces in her portfolio, especially that are related to sea, or the sea, and sea life. She likes a lot of fishes, or fish in general. And I just love how she incorporates all these kind of details into her projects all the time, even if there's like a not necessarily very complex but intricate shader work into, let's say, making a jellyfish or a fish actually moving based on vertex movement into a shader or something. It's her. And then in terms of just pretty stuff, I have another person. I always get his name wrong, so let me just double check. Because he has been a character artist for Assassin's Creed. Mike. And I know most of these people from the server experience points. From there, where I usually just sometimes hang out. I used to hang out there a bit more, but now not as much because I got busy and stressed. So I kind of put it on the back burner. My God, what is his name? And of course, I'll send you, of course, links to everyone I'm mentioning. Oh man. Anyway, but I think if I'm not super wrong, his name is Mike El Franchi. I hope I'm saying it good. Usually on experience point, that he's called the Doc, just as a nickname. But yeah, he does a lot of like pretty stuff in terms of like sculpts. Like I love his sculpts, especially the attention to detail and how he does just like the little texturing stuff in terms of like, let's say, scales or little details on like a material, like a cloth or something. Those are three that I have in my head right now. If I think more, I probably have more. But I think those are the let's say my top three.
All right. And now, continuing on that, I want to actually ask you something that I think it's the first time I ever asked on the podcast ever, because that's something I've also been thinking about recently.
Sure.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a new instructor called Laura. She's also my sculpting teacher right now, right? She's new, right, to the section.
Oh, Laura, yeah.
And I think before the start of semester, she had a talk about women in industry and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's aside from the fact that, for example, right now I'm in an environmental art Discord server, and the rate, and not just that server, just most servers. Like, of course, it's not a secret. The ratio of men to women who are in the industry or want to get in the industry is like a bit like interesting, to say the least. And and I was wondering, like, for you, let's say maybe when you were 18 or 19 or even way younger, when you at the point that you need a lot of inspiration or stuff like that, do you think if I don't know, like if the ratio was a bit different, or there could be more things done for representation of women in the industry, do you think would that have any change or like substantial effect on you? I mean, of course, that's a no-brainer question. The answer is pretty obvious, but just from your experience, alone, because going into class and 90% of students is just the opposite gender, you just feel just even not caring at all, but it just is a different like
it feels not necessarily feels wrong. It's just that to be honest, in some classes specifically, because I think back when in my first year, we used to have programming, and I think most people in that class that I had were men, but by accident, because back in the day programming was for everyone. Everyone had to do some programming. But yeah, it definitely feels, let's say, strange compared to how it was for me in high school, because in high school it was kind of like a fair-ish ratio between men and women, because I also come from like a very or like a background of literature and stuff, so the ratio between women and men in my class back in high school was fairly balanced. And what could be done, to be honest, I'm not really sure. I think at least just acknowledging it, or the fact that that is what is happening, is already a step. And just kind of taking that into account, let's say when you are a teacher, makes a big difference. But besides that, in terms of what could be done in the industry, that's a whole other thing that I'm not sure if I want to get myself into, because it's also probably has to do, because I didn't really research a lot in terms of like, well, history and so on, but it definitely has to do with it, right? Because, well, women got their rights to work later, and there was and there still is, I think, a lot of stigma around, let's say, women working in tech, and how much, let's say, they are able to do as much as men, I guess. And then there's also the discussion of like, okay, and what about children and taking care of children, and how that is literally kind of pushed on women a lot of the times. Like, oh, you kind of have to choose between, well, a career or making a child somehow. And God forbid you come back into the industry after, let's say, taking a break of 1 or 2 years because you had a literal child pop out of you. And then I think last time I checked, women still get less pay after, let's say, the break of maternity, compared to men that are going or not going through maternity, but more like, creating a family, I guess, right? But yeah, I don't necessarily have something in terms of like what could be done, but again, just, I guess, getting the information out there. And I think women in games, because that's the association that Laura is in, and I'm also, I want to be in. I just forget to apply for months. So that's on my list to just get into the association and just try to create small events, right? Because that's kind of the idea, to just create small events wherever you are, create awareness, and just see what you can do to, well, in quote unquote, fight against the stigma of like, oh, women can't do tech because this and that or something, right?
Well, yeah, actually, I don't want to name names exactly, right? But
Yeah.
it's actually like a topic that should be, I think, focused more, because I've heard from like some very credible people, like
Mm-hmm.
people I've been on calls with, like I'm just not
Mm-hmm.
like paraphrasing, like personally, like I've heard. There are some very weird stuff going on even in those big companies, right?
Oh, for sure.
And like with some very intense weird stuff. I'm not talking about just weird stuff. Maybe some guy is a creep or something. No, like just
Mm-hmm.
bad things. And the thing is, and not just those stuff. Aside from the payment you mentioned, yep,
Mm-hmm.
the same person mentioned to me that she got promoted, and the other
Mm-hmm.
guy also got promoted, and
Mm-hmm.
they were both the same position, same everything, and her salary was like a couple of thousands lower.
Mm-hmm.
Even though she's been there longer and she's been working harder and her portfolio is better,
Yeah.
and like these stuff, and not just, by the way, this is like just one segment of the things that are kind of wrong with the industry. The other big thing that I think should
Yeah.
be fixed, I think, like for artists should unionize, which is a huge
Oh yeah,
topic
for
of its
sure.
own.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
That's a subject for like the whole industry. Like the whole industry should like, well, create unions. Because I also think that a lot of these things, like the let's say, quote unquote, the very bad things that happen to women, are also, I I don't want to make a mistake, but mostly in the US, from what I read. Um, and of course, there are, without a doubt, there are also probably somewhere in Europe and all over the world. I don't want to like uh, minimize, let's say, people's problems or anything. But yeah, the stuff that I read that have been going on really bad with, let's say, AAA studio, and, well, for in terms of women and what happened to them, were big companies in the US where there's less protection, less, how do you call that? Um, advocacy? say,
No idea.
in a sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, here at least we have a bit more protection, just a bit more. And maybe you, even as a woman, right, maybe you get lucky at the, let's say, the police station, if something really, really bad happens, right, and you get like someone that actually believes you and not like minimizing whatever you're saying. But yeah.
Yeah. That's a topic of its own. Like, we could go on and on
Yeah,
for hours.
for sure.
For now, yeah. What game are you playing these days?
Yeah, that's a good question because I haven't really played in the past 2 weeks. I'm definitely binging Hades 2 for sure. I also played a bit recently the new what's it called? Well, Space Marine 2, but they're adding more content to it. So that I've been playing. I still need to finish another run of BG3 that is still on the
Same.
back burner. What else? Yeah, I think those are the main two at the moment. Like just Space Marine and Hades 2, just because they feel comfy, especially now that after, let's say, a day of work and talking, let's say during boot camps, and then also helping people, and then literally talking for 6-7 hours. I really feel like just going into Hades and then feeling comfy, and then just going to town, just slashing some I forgot how they're called, the little blobs with teeth.
Monster? Wait, which ones?
In the level where the Cerberus is.
Oh yeah, I forgot their name. I know what they are. They charge.
Yeah.
They charge at you and they bite you.
Yeah. Those. I love slashing those.
Yeah, and there was something I wanted to say. Damn, I forgot. Yeah, I do space out as well. It's not just you, Serena.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's both for you and me after quote unquote work, right? So brain has to adjust.
Yeah. And okay, so actually, I don't remember what I wanted to ask, but I'm just gonna go with the next one.
It's okay.
Is there anything non-art related, non-game related you got going on in your life, or would you like to learn or just do, like, just that are completely unrelated to what we're talking about by this point?
Well, do you mean like hobbies
Yeah,
or just general?
it could be hobbies. It could be like, maybe, I don't know, you have a dream of like biking across Europe. That could be something. Maybe
Okay.
it's a hobby of like learning how to crochet and make little slime balls with
Yeah,
crocheting.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Well, I did get a bit into embroidery. That's quite well, it's fun if you have the good materials for it. I kind of made the mistake of, let's say, buying the not the best material, and I kind of had a hard time actually getting the needle through the material for the cloth. But it's still really fun to actually, well, go through the process of just getting the needle through the cloth and then going back in, and then again, kind of also a patience exercise in a sense. What else? Oh yeah, baking and cooking. I really love it. Even though sometimes I have to do it in terms of like, oh, what's the most efficient? Because I do like to meal prep and plan out food for the week for me and for my boyfriend. because that just makes it easier to just have accessible, food instead of like, getting takeout or something. And that also saves us money, saves us hassle and everything. But that's again kind of like the rough part of cooking. But in terms of like just fun cooking or fun baking, I really love to sort of look back into my childhood and like, okay, what actually makes my inner child, in a sense, happy. And then, I try to make the things that my grandma or my mom used to do, or to make, in terms of like cakes or little cookies or anything like that. And it just, again, is slightly, again, kind of a patience thing, but also more like exploring, like, oh, how does this taste, or how does this taste? What if I combine this and this? Would it work? Or, oh, what if I put this in the fridge? Would it have an effect on how the end product looks or tastes or anything like that? So I feel like, let's say, a funny thing in the kitchen, right? As a woman, I feel more, how do you call that? Not free necessarily, but more like it's my place to experiment, compared to, let's say, experimenting with pixels at the computer. But I think those are the main things for me.
Speaking of pixel, why Pixel? How did that
Oh
username
God.
come by? The real question.
Oh yeah, that's my Discord nickname. I don't really know. It's just a thing I came up with, and well, since I stare at pixels like almost 24/7, because it's not just, at work I'm staring at pixels, and then in my off time, when I have, let's say, I want to look at something on YouTube on my phone, it's still pixels. It's just smaller screen, just smaller resolutions, but still pixels. So, since I deal with it, I guess, in such a reoccurrent time, or just generally dealing with it, or not experiencing, that sounds weird, but or experimenting with it, right? Because as a technical artist, you kind of have to work with different variables, especially in shaders, since you have the fragment shader and the vertex shader and so on. And that's when you experiment with pixels, let's say, quote unquote. But I think that's kind of where that came from. And Sera, it's kind of like a short nickname from my name, which is Serena. Mainly because sometimes people did not actually remember my name. Somehow, I don't know why. So I or found it difficult to pronounce my name, because apparently there are versions of my name in English and in Dutch, and those two versions are also different than the Romanian version, even though they're similar, right? But in terms of pronunciation, they're very far apart. I see
So
you're
wait,
thinking, but yeah.
you're Serena, not Serena.
Yes.
Oh God.
It's okay.
Chat,
I
we got new lore drop. All right. So this all
No, it's okay.
Serena. Okay, not
I
Serena.
really don't mind.
No, but still.
Yes.
Serena.
Yes.
Not Serena.
That's
Jesus Christ.
yeah, that Serena is the English pronunciation, right? Serena is the Romanian one, and then you have Serena, which is kind of, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it very well, but that's close to the Dutch pronunciation of it. So, yeah.
We've uncovered so many secrets today.
I know, right?
Yes, we did.
But that's also kind of why I kind of shortened it, because I didn't really want to deal with, okay, which version of the pronunciation anyone wants to actually pick. Especially since, in uni, we are, at least for now, hopefully, and maybe also for the future, international study. So I didn't have to deal with just pronouncing my name every time with the right version. So that's why I just made it smaller, like Sera. That's it.
Awesome.
Right. So the combination of like dealing with pixels and dealing with my or the pronunciation of my name, that's kind of how my Discord nickname came about.
All right, awesome. And also for reference, I always say that in my episodes. Right now, as I'm recording, is 7:21 p.m. It's 24th of March of 2025. Yeah. That is the day of and time of recording. I don't know when will this episode get uploaded, but to anyone who's listening or watching in future, hi.
Hello.
And to people who are in the future, actually, like we have also something else that I need to ask Serena from. This is like one of my favorite questions that I ask, and I usually make the answer of it a post on Instagram as well. Like, basically this segment, I call it time capsule. And why time capsule? Well, basically, here's what I'm going to ask you. Imagine this whole podcast, especially this point from now on, right? The recording of it will be saved and is stored, and in 200, 300 years, or at any point of time, people will open it up just to watch and listen. Right? How people in the year 2025 in Enschede talking about CMGT and games and Warhammer like thought about. Now, in that scenario, to anyone who might be listening at any point of time in the future, as yourself, Serena, the human, not the Serena pixel, not Serena, the art teacher, procedural art teacher who has to teach at 8:30, not that.
Sure,
the actual Serena. What do you what do you want to leave behind and say? Just anything. It doesn't have to be art related.
Oh man, that is very general. I really need to think about that a little bit.
No worries at all. Take your time.
I think pretty much to anyone that sees this and that is thinking that they're not going to make it. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to make it in my career, going to make it in high school, going to make it through my middle school or something. You are. You will, and if you're not, get someone to do it with. We are social animals, and I experienced it myself where I needed to, in a sense, push myself to do something, to get better or something, or generally, let's say, pass a test, or just also live life in a sense, because I had my dark moments, and always the one thing that got me out of the, let's say, mental hole was just talking to someone. So I'd say also be kind to each other and try to put yourselves into someone else's shoes. Like that's one thing that also, again, helped me a lot and is helping me actively also today. Just literally trying to empathize or sympathize. I
Empathize
don't
in this
remember.
case.
Yeah, empathize. Yeah, empathize with anyone that I kind of meet. And of course, it does help me as a teacher, but that does not take away from just, let's say, being an empath in my daily life and just thinking of how anyone else feels about things. And of course, I have to do that like in a, how do you call that? Like I can't go crazy with it, because if I do, then I end up being very sad very quickly with how the world is going right now. But baby steps in terms of empathizing with people and their situations. And I forgot exactly where I saw it or where I heard it, but it only takes 8 minutes to talk to someone and get them to feel better in terms of this is related, of course, to like more depression related, but a lot of the times when someone is feeling down or are in a very bad situation, it just takes one person. It doesn't matter if it's, family or if it's a friend or even just acquaintance. It just takes 8 minutes. And then, of course, you're not going to feel like, oh, so much better. But it kind of helps, in a sense, to relieve some of that, not necessarily sadness, but pressure out of your, or from your shoulders, in a sense. But yeah, in short, be kind.
True. And the thing, do you know what I like about the answers to this question? Is that everyone usually takes a step back, gets overwhelmed, just like you. They're like, oh boy, this is like I need to think about this. But usually, a lot of those times when people say that or do that is because they're afraid their answers could be cliche or too stereotypical. So they're trying to find a way to formulate that thought.
Phrase it.
But at the same time, even though it could be the exact same thing, everyone's way of expressing it is different and is a different perspective, which is still is super valuable in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
we're different people, like, so of course we're gonna have kind of a, even if, let's say, it's the same idea, we have different lenses because we have lived different things, right? So makes sense. Even the phrasing is slightly different.
And yeah, well, with that being said, Serena, do you have any thoughts or last things before we wrap up the podcast, or just anything you might want to share with us or talk about before we wrap up?
I don't think I have much besides where people could find me, I guess.
True. Like about that, yes, I put a link to an art station. Like that's the only social I did. Do you want me to put other stuff, other socials, or do you want to plug your anything else?
Just LinkedIn, I guess. You can find me on LinkedIn, art station, and yeah, pretty much that. And yeah, I also hope to do more art. Pretty much, to not just, of course, for portfolio, but also for just general stuff.
Personal satisfaction. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, the links to our session and LinkedIn are down in the description, and also the links to the artists mentioned, Serena mentioned, will be in the description
Yeah.
soon. And I don't know when will this episode get uploaded, but I hope y'all enjoyed it. Like, if there's any comments, feedbacks, or suggestions, please do let me know. And yeah, with that being said, I think that's it. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Till next episode. Bye bye.
Yep. Take care. Bye bye.